I'd like to call the meeting to order. This is the November 29th, 2018 meeting of Transportation and Circulation. Should we do the roll call?
Kathleen Rodriguez.
Here.
Your mic's not on.
Kathleen Rodriguez.
Here.
Jennifer Krieger, absent. Ed France, absent. Howard Green.
Present.
Susan Horn. David Hodges.
Present.
And Hillary Blackerby.
So, Madam Chair, we have a quorum, and I just would like to make you aware that Committee Member France will be a little bit late tonight, but he will be here. And then also, I was very sad to report that Jen Krieger has moved back to Austin, Texas. So she's no longer in Santa Barbara, and we'll really miss her as a committee member. Mm-hmm. So we'll be looking for another person to represent TCC in that spot.
All right, any changes to the agenda?
There are none.
Okay. Then, do we have any public comment, general public comment before we proceed? No? All right, then let's do the minutes from August 23rd.
Move approval of the minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions? Okay. Okay, that's good. All right, now we've got 3 items to evaluate. Is there any, does the staff wish to take them out of order in any way, or shall we just go right into the capital improvement?
We'd like to do them in the order they're here.
Okay.
And then I would also, you may recall that last meeting was Dan Gullett's last meeting, and sitting to my left, we now have Jessica Grant, who's going to be leading transportation planning. So her background, we had her before she left us for community development in our shop doing project management. And now I'm very pleased and delighted to introduce her to you now as leadership, full leadership as a supervisor in transportation planning. So very nice that on her first occasion being with you, she's introducing the capital improvement program. So I'll hand it over to her.
Welcome. How about a baptism of fire? There you go.
Right.
Welcome. Thank you. Yes, definitely glad to be back and before you all again. It's been a while, but excited. And it is capital improvement programming is one of my favorites, so I'm glad to be back. But yeah, definitely about a month ago, got a full welcome to the capital plan. So, but I'm excited to present it to you tonight. And with me is Amanda Flessy, who is the principal engineer, and she'll be going over a few things too during the presentation. So what's interesting is I'm presenting you tonight is the 5-year capital program, and the city revisits the capital program every 2 years. In years past, it's always been called the 6-year capital program, but new this year is just the 5-year capital program. Technically, we still have a 6th year, but instead of it being labeled as the 6th year, it is labeled as future needs, which I definitely feel is more appropriate because what you'll see is some repetition of projects. Kind of the bulk of them that were carried over from the last capital improvement plan. So I will be giving you an overview of the plan and then also the draft budget as well for the streets transportation program. And again, the first 2 years of a capital improvement plan it's supposed to closely follow the budget, and then the remaining years are kind of the outer years. And before I go into, just as a refresher for the capital improvement program, I'll just kind of provide some overview slides just as a reminder of what the capital program is all about. And really the goals of it is our planning document, and it's a way that we showcase what the capital needs are for the city. So it's not just the streets transportation capital, it's all department programs that are involved. And what it ends up looking like, this is the one from the last cycle, 2018 to 2023, that's packaged in the end, that goes typically before council in March every couple of years. And the types of projects that go into the capital plan it could be projects that were generated from council adopted plans and policies. So in the streets transportation world, it's coming from projects stem from the circulation element, the bicycle master plan, the pedestrian master plan. A big bulk also is to address just health and safety needs. That could be, again, in our world, that could be access ramps at street crossings so that they're meeting ADA standards. Big bulk of our program is just maintaining the existing assets that we have. And if you remember from our predecessor, John Wozniak, you always have heard lots and lots about our pavement maintenance and why it's so crucial. And other times projects just originate from, could be our advisory groups, a neighborhood group, a citizen, etc. One of the misconceptions that I hear, because we're always in lots of different public meetings, and a lot of the public will say, oh, well, the city has plenty of funding to fund whatever project, but not realizing that we have very distinct pots of money in the capital plan. And these were kind of the major categories, but we have the general fund, which is mainly just what government's all about. That when you think of general fund monies, it's parks and recreation, police and fire, etc. Enterprise funds, you think the airport, downtown parking, waterfront. Intra-city funds, those are really important, where departments pay for other departments for services. So you think of our public works department, that we need a lot of help with IT, so we pay money into information systems and our fleet management, etc. And then there's designated funds that we'll talk a little bit more about. But when in the streets transportation world, that's like Measure A and Measure C, where that's a specific source for transportation related projects. So what's also included in your attachment is all the projects that is in Exhibit B, and I'll briefly run through of how to read the various project sheets. And it basically, in the top right-hand corner, you'll see that it showcases where the department and program is from and what the specific project title is, a description providing the details of what the project's all about, and then where the next category is specific plans or policies, where is this project coming from? So that's when we would reference if it's a circulation element policy or bike master plan, etc. Or it could be maybe a federal or state regulation that we're trying to adhere to. And we also have our funding sources. It's quite common in our streets transportation capital projects to have multiple funding sources funding the projects. And we also have a section at the very bottom. It's called drivers, and that's what's kind of your headline message for the project. Is it a public safety project? Is it coming from our plans and policies? Do we have mechanisms for funding outside of our standard monies in our streets capital program? And then we have like the type of, what is it, a type of infrastructure? Is it a streets infrastructure, bike and pedestrian, etc.? As you know, in our streets transportation from the years past, we have over 80 projects, which gets overwhelming when we're trying to view it internally. And so in the past couple cycles, we've come up with these general themes, and it is the themes, it appears in alphabetical order, and so they're kind of grouped by these common titles. So it's bike facilities, bridges, corridor improvements, drainage, intersection improvements, maintenance, pedestrian enhancements, streetlights, and traffic signals. So that's where we could kind of, if we had to put them in a catch-all category. So you'll see the naming of all of our project titles with that, those words usually in front of what the project name is. So as I mentioned before, it's quite common in our capital program to have a lot of projects repeating, and sometimes it's just very normal because they're ongoing, especially with maintenance. You're always going to have pavement maintenance, etc. But we do have 13 new projects that I wanted to draw your attention to. There's bike facility projects, some corridor improvements, intersection improvements. That one, I think the Olive Mill, that's a mitigation project for the Highway 101 widening project, and some new pedestrian enhancement projects. Also new this year is the Vision Zero. That's our strategy that was adopted by Council in September of 2018. And it's really what the strategy is to eliminate all traffic fatalities and severe injuries while increasing safe, healthy, and equitable mobility for all. So what you'll be seeing as you go through some of these projects in these plans and policies section, we'll note if it is in a priority corridor that was outlined in the city's Vision Zero strategy. There were 23 priority corridors that were responsible for about 60% of major fatalities and injuries. And so we wanted to reflect that we have various projects in our capital program to address those safety issues in corridors. And we also have, besides highlighting a priority corridor, if the project we know meets the goals and policies of our Vision Zero strategy, then we make note of that too in our capital program. And then going into the funding sources that are really specific to the streets transportation program, we have the utility users tax, which is just the general tax levied for use for residential and community utility services. So that's your water, your trash, wastewater, etc. And it's a council policy that half of those UUT monies go to the streets capital and to maintenance. And then we have Measure A, that was a voter measure back in 2008, and that is specific to funding transportation projects. I'm not going to go into all the many grants opportunities that we have, but we've been very successful over the years in obtaining grant funding for a lot of our very crucial projects. And then Measure C, which is, I call it the game changer funding source that Amanda will speak to in just a few minutes. So as far as for this utility users tax and Measure A, when you think of streets capital, those are the funding sources. And right now, and the projections change from year to year. Right now, we're thinking of in receiving is about $4.3 million in fiscal year 20 and about $4 million in fiscal year 2021. And we currently, I have it just slightly off the list, but we're about in showcasing our need, and then that's what we have in Exhibit C, and we're about $1 million over our current, what we're projecting right now. And so this is going to need to be refined a little bit. In the next coming months, we'll confirm once we start to do the budget, to start to work on that, we'll have the even latest numbers of what we're working with and kind of do the final cuts from there. But again, it's a good mix between bike facility projects, bridges, drainage. We still have to have maintenance. Again, is a big that takes a lot of the funding, and then some pedestrian enhancement projects. For grants, I won't go into too many detail, but I also included that in attachment E, and what I have in parentheses next to the project title is what we know is funded at this point in time, and then we have some that we're asking for monies in the next couple of years that are currently unfunded, but we're seeking grant opportunities, and we're looking at those monies as leveraging opportunities for what the grant we're applying for. For example, Measure A grants are due in January, so we're looking for some match monies in there. With that, I'm going to just pass the baton quickly over to Amanda to talk about Measure C, because that funding source didn't exist the last time we had our capital improvement program.
Thank you. As Jessica said, my name is Amanda Flessy. I'm your principal engineer in streets engineering, and I manage the streets capital and Measure C program. Measure C just started this year, actually in April in 2008. And with that, we received approximately about $6 million in April to July 1st. We split that money into two different kind of programs. One was our capital improvement projects, and so that we contracted out. Big major capital improvement we contract out, and the other side was our city streets crews and all of their great work that they do around the city. So our Measure C is our infrastructure, and it's really for maintenance and repair. And our streets right now, we are receiving approximately 78% of that Measure C monies in our streets capital improvement program. Our streets program is really broken up into pavement improvements, access ramps, storm drains, sidewalks, street trees, signals, lights, everything that has to do with the right-of-way. With our CIP program, those big major projects, we kind of lump our pavement maintenance, our access ramps, our sidewalks, and our street trees all into one major project. So when you see a project going out to bid for $4.5 million, that's all that's involved is all of the pavement maintenance and the concrete work that goes along with it. Other projects right now in Measure C are your police station, some fire station, library, some parks and rec, and some wayfinding projects. Over the next 2 fiscal years, we're hoping to maintain the annual budget from Measure C. We have such a backlog of pavement maintenance and sidewalk and access ramp needs that we are barely skinning the surface of catching up. And it would probably take us about 10 to 15 years to catch up to get to just a maintenance-driven program. So we're really hoping that we can maintain this level to get to that. If we start to fall short of that, it may take longer. We have also with that our drainage repairs. Our drainage, we have never really addressed our drainage in past fiscal years, and so now we're really excited to start an asset management program and a capital improvement program with our Measure C monies. So that's what we've got for the next few years of our Measure C monies.
So with that, thanks, Amanda. And as Amanda said, there is a lot of catching up to do, but it's so exciting to have that source. And as far as, because we're slightly over our projections in the streets capital program, and then also for Measure C monies as well. So that's something internally that we look for project prioritization. And again, what we value as the highest is safety and maintenance. Those are the projects that come first in line. But even on some safety projects, still we really depend upon grant funding for those as well. And as far as for next steps is...
Excuse me.
Yes.
This is a lot. So
Yes.
we have at least one question at
Sure.
this point, if you don't mind. I know I'd like for you to be able to finish, but maybe
Yes.
you wouldn't mind. Okay.
This is the last slide.
Oh, okay.
And
Very good.
and then we can go into
Okay,
questions,
very good,
if
thank
that's
you.
okay.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
it's really the after tonight, and we'll receive some feedback from you. Yes, it is definitely a lot. It's hard to wrap your head around it, and because we just have so many projects, and just for the overall the citywide program. Goes before the Planning Commission in either January or February. There hasn't been an exact date set. Once I know, I'll let you all know. And then the citywide CIP program then goes from the Planning Commission to then City Council. Typical target month is March. And then starting to parallel that effort is the 2-year budget cycle, which will go to City Council in April and then hopefully be finalized in May or June. So with that, yes, we're both happy to answer any questions.
Okay, sorry I broke the flow of your presentation there. Okay, questions? Susan Horn.
I was hoping that you would refer, this is just a little logistics thing. I was hoping you would refer to what we have in front of us. I mean, these are fabulous slides, they're overview. I'd love to have those, but I can't find them in here, and I'm wondering, am I missing it, or?
There was a separate little, it's the one.
I know, is it one of these?
Yes. Yes.
It's this? No, it's not in this one. Anyway, I couldn't find it, and so it's somewhere in these? It's this one?
The presentation slides are.
Oh, here, now I found it.
Okay.
But, this is a lot of paper also. So I was hoping that you would have us with something visual that we could look at later. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I have a quick question. Have we ever gotten OTS grants for on-the-ground projects as opposed to like PD enforcement? Are there any examples of an Office of Traffic Safety grant for an intersection or some capital or infrastructure project?
Chair Rodriguez and
The rest of us?
yes, Commissioner France. I was going to say Ed, but no, not that I'm aware of.
Ms. Flessy? I was just wondering that the prioritization is to speed up the rate of maintenance so that we can catch up over the next several years to kind of get a kind of status quo place? Could you elaborate on that?
Sure, Chairman Rodriguez, Commissioner Hodges. We are playing catch up right now. Usually we've broken our system into 6 different zones in the past for our pavement zones. We have kind of put that by the wayside because there is such a high need all over the place. We decided to change our strategy and do the higher need, higher volumes, along with coordinating with other utilities is pretty important as well. SCE has their big underground. That's pretty important. Water has doubled their water replacement system. Wastewater has also increased their rehab and point repair projects. So trying to coordinate with all of those other projects, as well as meeting the highest need with the highest volume, is pretty much our strategy for at least the next 5 years of our capital program.
So you don't end up repaving a street after you put a water line.
Correct. We're trying to avoid digging into our street that we just repaired, and we're actually redoing our standard details to address that. So any kind of private developments that come in would have to have a little bit more of a stringent or moratorium into digging up our streets that we just grind and overlaid or slurry sealed. You're
welcome. Mr. Green?
Thank you. You mentioned a section, I see a number of projects relating to drainage. Where's that set start? Here it is. Page 43 in the thick document. 41. You said this is a new focus, but I think these things must have been going on for years anyway. Most of them look like they're built up infrastructure. What's new?
Yes, Chairman Rodriguez, Commissioner Green. What's new is our asset management program. That's new. All of the other projects that have been there that have been unfunded, identified as drainage, we've kept those and tried to now present funding for those items. But what's new is our storm drain asset management program. So we are now currently identifying and cleaning and rating our storm drains, our existing storm drains. And from there, we're hoping to develop a CIP program and get those addressed because they're in major need. They have never been addressed in any of its life cycle. So a lot of them are to the life cycle of the system and need to be repaired and addressed accordingly.
When might this inventory be something we can look at?
I'm hoping we're in the middle of this process, so I'm hoping I can bring this to you, our CIP program, at the end of the fiscal year, of this fiscal year coming up, the new, yes.
Mr. Hodges?
I'm just a corollary question with regard to drainage. I know that the city's trying to use percolation or detention systems to retain more water and direct it back into the aquifer instead of the ocean. Is this improvement of this inventory lead toward a system that would put more water into the aquifer and less into the sea?
Commissioner Rodriguez, no. The Measure C is strictly for maintenance and repair. And so we're just trying to maintain and repair the infrastructure that we have. Any other improvements would have to be identified in our CIP, and possibly it will be in our asset management, and then we would go out for grants or find some other funding source for that. But for right now, This is just a maintenance and repair program.
I'd like, okay. I have just maybe an overview question, or if I'm reading this properly, your whole budget for everything is about $50 million a year, or this year, and then it goes up. Fiscal year 20 is $50 million. Is that correct? It's just like page 3 of 3 at the very beginning. I don't want to, it's not a trick question. Is that,
Chair Rodriguez, that in number, that's the need.
Got
The
it.
50 million is the need.
Got it. Okay.
The streets capital program, what we're projecting just on a per year is just over 4 million. And then there's maybe about $17 million for Measure C funds that we can seek funding for. And then the rest is either looking at grant opportunities, or if that doesn't come to fruition, then it becomes just an unfunded need in our capital program.
so roughly 18 million Measure C, 4 million that's funded? Did you say 4?
So under Measure C, the city receives from Measure C, the projections is approximately $22 million a year.
Okay.
And then, like for the example that Amanda gave for fiscal year 19, there was about 78% that went to transportation related maintenance needs. So what we're hoping is to continue with the bulk of those Measure C monies to fund transportation related infrastructure maintenance.
Okay, I still need to understand, just really globally, you have a need of 50 million. How much money are you going to put to that? Not, I don't need to know from which source, just like you've got this much need and you've got this much to cover it, sort of.
Excluding grants, it would be about 21 million.
Got it. And then the grants are, so with grants, that really varies. Yeah. I guess what I just really want to point out is that I certainly remember meetings here in the past where we were talking about, well, we'd really like to fix our streets. We'd really like to do something for the pavement. And it was kind of grim, you know?
Very
So I think it's important to point out that this 18 million that we're receiving of 22 for streets is terrific. Is this part of the work that we've seen around town so much in the last few months? Yeah.
Yes,
Thanks.
Chair Rodriguez, yes, it is. And it will be continuing to see this kind of construction work around town year-round. That's our goal, is to keep it going. We're actually starting our 19A project December 10th. So you'll be seeing a lot more of our concrete work going around town over the winter months, and then slurrying in the spring, and then put out our grind and overlay project for the summer month.
Well, personally, and I'd like to hear if other people have heard this, it's the double-edged sword. I've had a lot of people say to me, why are the streets all torn up? What's going on? Why do they have to do it all right now? And I have said, you know, I think we got some money, and that's why you kind of got to do it when you got the money. So I don't know how to address that with folks, because it seems like for somebody, it's always the wrong time of year, depending, right? Have other people had those comments from people? Okay, just can't
Well,
win.
who likes construction in the middle of the street?
Well, everybody, right.
Call in now. The other thing that's happening is that the Southern California Edison is doing their restoration project, where they're really making the downtown more robust. And Santa Barbara, as a city and as a people, have asked for that, because we've had so many power outages downtown in the last 5 years. So they are answering, but that means we have to indulge in some construction. And so that's compounding the issue along with Measure C work.
Madam Chair, is there any public comment, or are we going to comments?
I don't have any requests. I think Howard still had
Okay.
some questions.
I'm confused by the number on page 6 of the colored handout, which would be slide 12, I think, matching up with the numbers on page 3 of 3 at the thick.
What was the slide title?
12, number 12.
Fiscal year 20 and 21.
Okay. All right. Let me just go to that.
I think it does say 12 in the corner.
Yes.
Okay, now
So-
I can't quite read the bottom total, but it doesn't look
Yes.
like the totals that are on page 3 of 3.
So, Chair Rodriguez and Commissioner Green, this is what we have outlined as our needs from the Streets Capital Fund. It roughly totals just over 5 million on both of those fiscal years.
But 5 and 50 are way apart.
Oh, I see. So this is the projection of funding that we're looking at right now, just in our streets capital. So that would be the bulk of this UUT, utility users tax, and Measure A, and those are approximately 4 million and about 4 million for fiscal year 2020, and then fiscal year 2021. The 50 million is just our overall need in that funding.
1 year.
Just 1 year. And so that would be, again, of a mix of some of the Measure C funding requests and UUT capital, and then some of our grant monies as well. So it's totaling all of those sources.
So if I understand correctly, this slide is just UUT and Measure A.
Correct.
There's a lot to fit on a slide,
That gets specific about those
where it's coming
grants
from.
as to pockets of money.
And this is the listed projects that are requesting funding in the next 2 years from those particular funding sources.
Are you done?
Hillary
Okay.
Blackerby, please.
Thank you. Thank you for this presentation. I really like the format, actually. I especially like when you explain everything that's on the project sheet, because it can be confusing to people. So I appreciate that. Having seen many of these over the years, it's still great to have that tutorial. And I want to say congratulations that now you have money to do at least some of the things that you've done. And this is a really big, moment for the city of Santa Barbara, because for years and years, the CIP comes, and yes, too bad he retired right before he got money. But John would come and say, well, we're going to fix half a sidewalk and try to slurry seal some streets, right? And that was basically all we had the money to do. And thanks to the voters, we have Measure C, and, there's also more money coming in through the state from SB1, which will remain, thankfully. But I appreciate the way that it seems you are taking a fresh look at it now that you have the money, to really make it count as best you can. So I'm very excited about that. My street was all ripped up earlier this year, and I loved it because I knew it was going to be great when it was done, and it is. So I appreciate that. One thing I had a question of years of looking at these, one of the intersection improvements I think that had been listed many years, and I don't see it here, but maybe got lumped into something else, was Alomar and State. I know that that's sort of a bear of a intersection, and that had been listed previously, but I don't see it here now.
Chair Rodriguez, committee member Blackberry, excuse me. Good evening. My name's Derek Bailey. I'm with the Public Works Department, the Traffic Engineering Group. The reason you don't see it in the CIP for next year is because it'll be built by then. So we're planning on,
Check you out.
yeah, we're planning on putting it out to bid in the spring and in construction by the summer. So
Fantastic.
look forward to that.
I love that. Cool. That's really all I had, and I think it's exciting to see, in the years when we didn't have the money, we put a bunch of plans in place, bike master plan. That's great, and then also got just a ton of grant funds through the ATP, which hopefully we'll continue to get. Don't let the state hear that we have money now, but it's just setting it up, and I appreciate all the work staff's done over the years, both those who are here and not here, to really set us up to get going and hopefully get to a stable place where we can just maintain what we have instead of having to rip it up and redo it. So I just want to say congratulations and thanks for all your work.
Susan?
I was trying to figure out how the Vision Zero projects that were the priority corridors and things were integrated into the next year's thing, and I can see a lot of them in, they're really coming up fast. So, but I just wondered if you could say something about how these are priority corridors and how they are being integrated into the project that's the next 5 years.
So, Chair Rodriguez and Commissioner Horn, it is, I'm very excited that Council adopted this strategy, and for the projects, some of them had already been on our radar, and so some of them are carryovers maybe from the last capital programming cycle, and then some of the projects are new. As far as for some of these, some are more just do it projects that we can incorporate with some of our pavement maintenance when we do restriping. And the next item before you tonight is our first Vision Zero project, so it's very exciting. And then the rest of these, some of them we've been working really hard to get grant funding. So some of the ones would be like for the bicycle master plan, like the East Side Boulevard gap closure and West Side Boulevard gap closure. Those are funded projects from the Active Transportation Grant. And I would say that there's a good bulk of these are in either development or we're actively seeking grant funding right now. So they are high on our radar because we do, through the collision data that through the Vision Zero program, we do recognize that there are safety concerns that we do want to have addressed sooner rather than later. So it is something that we will be very active working on. And I think as we progress into 2019, you'll start to hear that Vision Zero presence through a lot of our projects, and any time that we have them coming up, you will be seeing them. I'm not going to go into all the details for each one tonight, but there will be a reoccurring theme next year and the years forward of what we're doing to address those priority corridors.
So you'll be labeling them as the Vision Zero priorities so that we'll kind of know as
Correct.
you go.
Correct.
That's what you're saying?
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, it looks really, really great into the next year's projects. They're all in there. Not all, but they're there.
Is there any further discussion? Howard?
Thank you. I understood from one of the slides that you're going to be presenting this to the Planning Commission and then to the Council. Something that I think would help all of us is if you added another column on the first 3 page, a column that has the B section page number so we can link. And maybe they're alphabetical in both sets. I haven't had time to focus on that. There's some 80 project sheets. Second thing is I'm understanding from the variety of what's been said that some of these 20 and 21 year projects have already been identified as the funding. It's almost like they're going to happen. And somehow by shading, perhaps, on this 3-page, you could indicate perhaps the color code would be by source of money. I guess the utility and Measure A are kind of combined, but some sort of buckets to say, hey, this one's a slam dunk, and then it would allow us to focus on those that might be exposed that need help. Thank you.
Chair Rodriguez,
Yes, Mr. France?
if I could.
Go right ahead.
Thank you. So first off, my apologies for being late, and thank you for this presentation and all this work. It is really tremendous, and it's so great that we're in the funding situation that we are right now. Just to go back to a question, looking at the Measure A and the utility users tax, our previous maintenance was that sort of like $2.5 million a year. So overall, is there anything I'm kind of not including, or where were we a couple years ago and where are we now in terms of the total amount of money that's going into pavement maintenance?
Chair Rodriguez, Commissioner France. Right now, we're averaging on maintenance with SB1, the user tax, just in the capital improvement program, not including the city crews work. We are looking about 15 to 17 million this year for FY19. Obviously, FY20 and 21 will differ. Hopefully, we'll get the same amount from Measure C, and also SB1 and Measure A will go down a little bit because we have some bonding that will be coming up. So I know those projections are going to be reduced slightly, I think by $500,000 or $1 million. But hopefully if we continue with Measure C the way that it is, that's what we're looking for with pavement maintenance. And again, that pavement maintenance also includes sidewalk access ramps, sidewalks, and everything that goes with the CIP project.
And previously, we were more in the range of like $2.5 million a year, or?
Yes.
Correct. Yes.
It was always $2.5 million. I think the need, at least when John Wozniak used to give his presentations, I kind of have it burned into my memory that it was always like really $9 million at the time when he would give his presentations that were always in a $7 million plus deficit every year. So yes, Measure C has really been a blessing, but as Amanda says, we've been in so many years of deficits that it's going to be a while till we just get to a regular maintenance program.
Totally. And obviously, yeah, that's the case, and great that we're getting at it. I do just want to harken back to those days of John making the pitch, because I think it was always a compelling case for certain line items that we really wanted to have. There were certain years that sidewalk infill didn't happen. And there were always wants that we didn't get funded. So, seeing within the utility users tax, a little bit of a shortfall in the current, budget versus projected. Even though obviously we're trying to get our road condition, as good as we can, as fast as we can. Just do remember that there's it's so great that we now have regular funding for a sidewalk and that we have other outside funding for so many of these projects. But in terms of our core funding, it would be great that in whatever modification you all have to do, that those other line items that in years past we sacrificed for, that we're able to maintain.
If there are no more questions or comments, I want to just thank you for your report. It was wonderful.
Madam Chair, for the next item, we want to, Derek Bailey will be giving a presentation, but I wanted to let you know that we visited the neighborhood and had some very favorable responses from a neighborhood workshop that we attended. One of the things that's very interesting about these workshops for us is we are moving into a different approach as we work with the community. In the past, we have been, because this is Santa Barbara, because it's Santa Barbara, we've been very sensitive to come to the community with options and really vet those options with the community. And as you well know, with this Vision Zero strategy, there's a little bit of a shift that's occurred in that the council's prioritized our work to eliminate deaths and severe injuries created by collisions in the right-of-way. And so it is a very technical, data-driven process by which we see repeated collisions happening over time. And then the council's given us the charge to drill down through an engineering enforcement education approach to eliminating those collisions. So we were a little just kind of wondering, how is this going to go with the neighborhood, because we came in with the Las Positas, and in Las Positas Road is 4 lanes. As far as I've been here, I know there's been discussions in the past, but it's kind of sacred space. So to get to this place where we're recommending a safety improvement that's Vision Zero oriented, but also drops a lane, going to a neighborhood and wondering what that would be like. We were a little, we were like, okay, how's it going to go? So we're pleased to report that went very well. And Derek's going to present that to you, and then we're going to take that to council early next year as our first Vision Zero project. So Derek Bailey, take it away.
Good evening once again. We really started thinking about Las Positas more closely last March. We got some phone calls from some very concerned residents about a collision that happened on Las Positas last March, and it was near the intersection with Stanley, which is kind of the northern end of the Samarkand neighborhood, directly across from the golf course. And there was a vehicle waiting to make a southbound left turn from Las Positas onto Stanley. Another southbound vehicle coming from State Street. And based on the police collision report at a fairly high rate of speed. And they came up behind the vehicle that was waiting to turn left and didn't have enough time to react, and actually swerved into oncoming traffic and had a head-on collision with somebody going in the northbound direction. Caused quite a bit of damage and resulted in some injuries. So the neighborhood was very concerned about this. So we started digging into the collision history a little bit more in this area. And this is the specific area that we were looking at. So the little traffic signal symbol is State Street at the northern end, the Macaw intersection on one side with the Mackenzie Park access on the other, and kind of ending down near the Adams School entrance, which is San Onofre Road. Just looking at the collision history in this section of the road from Alegria up to Macaw, in the past 5 years, 2013 to 17, there were 20 total collisions, and 11 of those collisions are what we consider correctable. So they're collisions that we can apply engineering countermeasures to, that we can reasonably solve and make them not reoccur anymore. In those 11 correctable collisions, there were 15 injuries that would have been prevented had changes been in place. If you look back 5 years earlier than that, so the 2008 to 2012 timeframe, there were 18 collisions, 12 correctable collisions, 11 preventable injuries. So you start to look at that, and there's a pattern. And what that really tells us is if we don't do anything, 5 years from now, if we look at the collision record again, there's probably going to be another 11 or 12 correctable collisions, another 12 to 15 people hurt in this section of roadway. So just look what we do once we start looking at the collision history is we start looking for patterns and what specifically is going on this street. This is the Stanley intersection. So this is one concentration of collisions in this corridor. There was one collision. This doesn't include the collision that happened earlier this year that I just described, but one collision here that my mouse is hovering over where somebody rear-ended, somebody waiting to turn left into the neighborhood. There was a broadside collision, somebody pulling out of the neighborhood. There was a side swipe, somebody changing lanes just north of the neighborhood. This one here, this little squiggly line, that represents a single vehicle collision, somebody losing control. That's an example of one that isn't typically correctable by engineering countermeasures. So for something like that, those are typically DUIs, speed related. Police enforcement is typically a more appropriate way to address those types of collisions. But the Macaw intersection is where the lion's share of the collision history is happening. And the bulk of them are this cluster here. So that's the date of every time that this particular type of collision happened. So what this represents is somebody making a northbound left turn from Las Positas left onto Macaw to go towards the golf course. They smashed head on with somebody coming in the opposite direction from State Street. It's a really unusual type of collision, especially in this quantity because the sight lines are really good out there. From that left turn location, you can see almost to State Street, so it's really unusual that they couldn't see somebody coming. So what we think is going on is people, when they're making that left turn, they're sitting in a through lane. And by sitting in that through lane, and people are traveling through that section at sometimes a really high rate of speed, people are nervous sitting there waiting to make that left-hand turn, and they probably have one eye on their rearview mirror looking behind them and one eye looking forward for a gap in traffic and taking chances. We think that's what's happening. So that happened 8 times in the last 5 years. It also happened once going in the other direction. Twice people actually got rear-ended from that while they were making a left turn. And then twice people got broadsided pulling out of Macaw. So when we look at the pattern, and that overwhelming pattern is that left turn onto Macaw from the major street to the minor street, the engineering solution to that is we need a left turn lane. We need to get people out of the through lane so that they're not taking chances like that. The challenge at the Macaw intersection is that it's really constrained due to topography. On the north side of the intersection, it's pretty steep drop off down into the Loretto Plaza parking lot in the Mackenzie Park area. On the south side, there's utility poles and actually quite a steep embankment on the southeast corner. So widening the intersection in the shaded blue areas in order to provide enough space for a left turn lane is really cost prohibitive. This is a multi-million-dollar project. So we started looking into what can we do to possibly restripe the road. And what we came up with that we're very confident will work is to repurpose one of the 2 southbound lanes into a center left turn lane. And so this is kind of hard to see, but we've got a better illustration on the next slide. But basically the driveway into Gelson's is right near the top of this image, and Macaw is just towards the bottom of the image. So in between that driveway and Macaw, as you're driving southbound, just follow my cursor, 2 lanes will merge into one in this section right here. Then there'll be enough space for a left turn lane into the park, and for northbound, going the opposite direction, there'll be a dedicated left turn lane onto Macaw. This is what that road looks like right now. So the golf course is on the left, and the Macaw intersection's right here by my cursor. That's what it will look like after the restriping happens. You can see there's only one southbound lane, and there's enough space for that left turn lane into McCaw. So I'll just toggle back and forth again so you can see the difference. So that's existing. You can see there's 2 lanes, 2 lanes in each direction. And then that's the change. So there continues to be 2 northbound lanes. It's just 1 southbound lane gives us the space we need to make that left turn lane. Moving south near Stanley, there would be a southbound left turn lane into the neighborhood. And this is the Adams School intersection right here. By the time we get to the Adams School entrance at San Onofre Road, if we don't go back to 2 lanes, we're going to cause a lot of congestion. It does back up even with 2 lanes at that traffic signal. If there was only 1 lane there, the queues would be twice as long. So at times right now it does back up to Alegria. With 1 lane, the queues would exceed 500 feet multiple times during the day. This is that section a little bit further down. Again, 2 lanes in each direction. The golf course is on the left. This is looking north towards State Street in the mountains. And just with the striping sketched in, you can see there's a center left turn lane. And back here at this intersection, there'd be a dedicated left turn lane into the neighborhood. So how can this possibly work is the question we got at the neighborhood meeting that we had a few weeks ago. The capacity of a free-flowing traffic lane is about 1,600 to 2,000 vehicles an hour, and this is a free-flowing section. There are no stops between State Street and Adams School. The maximum northbound volume that we typically see during the day happens around 4:30 in the afternoon, and it's about 930 vehicles an hour. And the southbound maximum volume happens around 2:45 in the afternoon when school's just letting out and a lot of parents are coming into the area to pick up their children. That volume is around 820 an hour. So you can see 820 an hour can fit into 1 lane if the capacity of that lane is 1,600 to 2,000. But why southbound and not northbound? Because northbound volume was roughly the same. It has to do with the arrival pattern and how traffic is moving into the area. And what I mean by that, if we look at this sketch right here, this is the traffic signal at Adams School. And when the light turns red, what happens is each of these little blue squares represents a car queuing up. Traffic queues up, waiting for the light to turn green. And when the light does turn green, all of that traffic starts moving north through the corridor together. Side by side, there's a really dense platoon of traffic moving north. We just can't merge all that traffic together all at once. It's just too much and it won't work. Whereas southbound, most of that southbound traffic is coming from the State Street intersection, and it's getting metered into that section of roadway. It doesn't all enter that section of roadway at once like northbound does. If you think of the different movements of the traffic signal, westbound left turns go, and then the eastbound right turns go, and then the southbound throughs go. So that those movements are all spread over a couple of minutes. So there's rarely a lot of traffic entering that southbound area side by side like there is northbound. And so some of the benefits and trade-offs with the project benefits, there'll be a middle refuge area for left-turning traffic. And that'll eliminate an estimated 10 to 15 collisions, and more importantly, probably about 15 injuries over the next 5 years. And there'll be some southbound speed control. You can only go as fast as the person in front of you. So there will be some southbound speed control, which has been important to the neighborhood as well. Trade-offs, there's fewer gaps in southbound traffic. So if we concentrate all of the traffic that's currently using 2 lanes into 1, there will be fewer gaps in traffic for people that want to turn left out of the neighborhood. But there will be that center refuge area, so they could make a 2-stage left turn out of the neighborhood if they so chose. There will be about a 6-second increase in travel time between State Street and Adams School, so it's really negligible. one of the things we got asked was, well, what about evacuations? Because that's on a lot of people's minds right now, especially with what happened in Northern California and the fires recently. The bottleneck here is at State Street. We can't, even if we increase the volumes to the capacity that that intersection can handle, it can't feed enough traffic into this section to cause a significant amount of congestion. We modeled it just loading up the intersection at State Street to as much traffic it can handle, and the delay in this corridor went from 6 seconds up to about 20 seconds. So there's really no risk to evacuations by doing this project. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Ms. Blackerby?
Yeah, I have a question about, you can go back to slide 20. I guess it shows the 2 left turn lanes from State onto Las Positas. And so we know there are 2 left turn lanes. With the restriping of Las Positas in the sort of McCaw, State between McCaw section, are they turning into 2 and then they become 1? Or it just wasn't clear on the slide number 10. If it stays 2 lanes and then the right one merges in, or how does that?
Right, and I apologize for the scale of the drawing. It's hard to fit this all into a PowerPoint presentation.
I'm very impressed with the Photoshop work, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, so with the dual left turn lanes, there has to be 2 accepting lanes on the other side of the intersection. Right. So that'll remain. Okay. It's
just
south
hard
of
to see in that.
Yeah, it's south of the driveway into Gelson's that the merge happens. It's really interesting with those 2 left turn lanes. We actually find that a good amount of that outside left turn lane is actually turning into Loretto Plaza.
Yep.
So
That's right.
Again, it just makes that merge that much easier.
And I think too that what you described about on slide 7 with that litany of collisions there, in addition to what you're saying of people being nervous to turn left and then they just shoot the gap. Mm-hmm. When people turn left on either turning right out of the Gelson's parking lot or turn left off of State, they're like, all right, I got to get up this hill, and they gun it. And sometimes they're gunning it to get out of the Gelson's parking lot to not get hit by people turning left or coming straight or turning right off of State Street. So I feel like there's a bunch of nervous people coming from all different directions here. And so it's no surprise to me that has happened quite a bit. And yeah, we'll see what happens. I appreciate you taking a look at it.
Mr. Green?
Hi, I love this. Thank you.
Thank you.
The question that Hillary just asked about the 2 State Street left turn lanes, I've seen markings. I don't know whether Upper State, just before it collides with 101, has lanes marked for 101 and 101. Could something be done in that outer State Street left turn lane, the one closest to the curb, be labeled in some way or signed so that it says Loretto Plaza only, or just not only, but just Loretto Plaza, so that people could be conditioned to align, to choose what I think you're already saying they're doing. But
Committee Member Green, yeah, I think they're already doing that, absent of the markings. Most people using that intersection are familiar with where the destinations are on the far side. Signing destinations and markings in multiple left turn lanes, there's very few agencies that have had good success with that. Overhead signs are really the best way to do something like that. And there's no easy way to mount an overhead sign over left turn lanes way out in the middle of the street like that. You'd need a really long mast arm. So I don't think that we'd realize the benefit for the amount of expense it would take to put in those types of signs. Thanks.
Susan? Ms. Horn?
Thank you. A few years ago, I remember that there were a lot of delivery trucks, big trucks, traveling on Las Positas, and there was a problem with that. And I'm just wondering, is that ever a factor anymore, or are those heavy trucks prohibited on Las Positas? Because I haven't seen them on Las Positas anymore.
Chair Rodriguez, Committee Member Horn, if you can picture yourself getting off the freeway onto Calle Real, and then you make a right-hand turn to go north on Las Positas, there is a yellow no right turn sign there. And it's the only sign like that I've ever seen in my life. It's not a regulatory sign, it's an advisory sign. So it's advising trucks not to turn up Las Positas. It's not illegal for trucks to use Las Positas. It is an arterial street, and being an arterial street, it's the way people get around Santa Barbara, moving longer distances and higher volumes of traffic. Number of decades ago, that was a concern, though, and a lot of the businesses on Upper State Street, the city worked with them in order to reroute deliveries to, use Hope, get off the freeway at Hope and go up to State Street that direction. We know there's still some trucks, probably new delivery people, that use Las Positas because I'm sure their GPS are guiding them that way, but there is a lot less truck traffic on Las Positas than you'd expect to see on a busy road like that. So the efforts have been somewhat successful.
Great. Yeah, I wondered what happened, and so
Yeah.
thank you.
Mr. Hodges?
Thank you. First, the restriping at Loretto Plaza on Las Positas has been a tremendous improvement. So thank you for that. That's just one, and this is as someone who drove this street almost every day, multiple times. The addition of a left turn lane, especially going on to Macaw, will be a huge benefit, and I really appreciate these changes. I agree with you. I think there will be a slowdown at school drop-off time, but these improvements will dramatically increase the safety. So thank you so much.
Thank
Great
you.
improvements.
I just have a couple of concerns. Just in understanding how this project fits in with Vision Zero and other issues, just for my own edification. When we talk about the Las Positas corridor in Vision Zero, is that all of Las Positas Road? And is this the part that's a problem? You understand what I'm asking? Because then there's that fabulous, there's actually, I'm not going to be sarcastic, that difficult intersection of State and Las Positas, which is so large. And I'm wondering, is that a high accident corner also?
Chair Rodriguez, from a Vision Zero perspective, when we identified the priority corridors in the city, they're end-to-end. So as we develop strategies to reduce collisions on these corridors, there might be some projects that address the entire corridor from end to end, but oftentimes what you're going to see is we're going to have to take bite-sized chunks of corridors because Las Positas is a really long road. So this is one thing that we're going to do on Las Positas that's going to improve safety. Another thing on Las Positas that we're going to do to improve safety is going to be the bike path. That's going to improve safety down at the southern end of Las Positas. Las Positas and State Street intersection is kind of the confluence of two priority corridors. So there are collisions that are happening at that intersection. We haven't developed a strategy yet to address them. So that will be coming. But as far as our strategy on just how to address these corridors, it is likely going to be bite-sized chunks.
Thank you. I think that's really important for us to understand because as we're all learning about Vision Zero, it's a whole different concept, as has certainly been clearly stated. So it's almost like a mosaic. You've got a piece here, piece here, piece here, and eventually the whole corridor will be cleaned up. But it isn't all an all or nothing type of a project, is what I'm understanding.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's all
Thank
going to
you.
depend on funding as well.
Of course.
We're going to take advantage of opportunities when funding arrives. So if there are restriping projects or bridge construction projects, if there's a safety improvement that we can do right there, we will. So over time, we'll build this all together and make a safer network.
Well, I've, lived in Santa Barbara, over 45 years now. And I know for a long, long time, I had a friend in Samarkand. I don't go into Samarkand very often, but it's got that little network of streets, and it's a little tricky. But I learned early on, and people would even advise me, when you're going out of Samarkand, go to the Signal by Adams School. Don't even try to go out of the Samarkand at any of those other streets. It's just too dangerous. So people have tried to adapt to that difficulty, and this modification should certainly help. So thank you. Any other comments? Howard?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can we look at slide 16? Yeah, a nice picture. The two-way turning lane in the middle is something that a lot of people don't know how to use. And I know that education is part of the Vision Zero. I think that maybe some sort of training for drivers on the rules on that. It's not a passing zone, but it is a turning zone, and you can continue, I believe, you can continue out from a side street and drive a little way in that two-ways passing zone. Is that correct? And I got a couple more.
Short accelerations, yes. It's not legal or intended to drive extended distances, but yes.
It's a merge possibility.
Spot
Okay.
on, yep.
That lane looks like it's actually bigger than the travel lanes. Maybe that's optical. I don't know.
It's to do with the Photoshop.
Okay.
This is we've got Steve Sizzler. He's incredibly talented. Photoshop on staff. The lanes will be evenly distributed. It's just the angle and everything. So.
I have anticipated at times trying to bike from 101 up to State Street, bicycle, pedal bike. And there's an area sort of the top of that where there's a side alley almost.
Yeah.
That
right
is a relief for nervous bikers. But the stretch leading up there is heck, it's hard. And I'm wondering if you couldn't at this time also consider bike laning northbound. The area on the left, on the southbound side, is that a breakdown lane or is that a bike lane?
Southbound is a bike lane, yes.
It's posted, and so it would be a symmetrical northbound bike lane. If
Committee Member Green, in order to make that happen, we would have to prohibit parking on Las Positas. That was not part of the recently updated bicycle master plan, so there would have to be a separate community process to remove that quantity of parking. It is surprisingly well used, parking on that street. I suspect people that live on Las Positas are uncomfortable backing out of their driveways, and it's easier to park on your street and go. But yeah, that would be the process to put in bike lanes as well, as we would need a separate public process.
But in some places, bike lanes are roadside of the parking area.
I see what you're saying. Yes, there's not enough room here to do that. We don't have enough room to maintain parking and squeeze in a bike lane in between the traffic lane and the parking lane. Yep.
We do have one speaker request on this item. I want to make sure. I just don't want to forget this. Barry, okay, go ahead.
What about putting a Sharrow in the right lane?
During the bicycle master plan, we did not get feedback that Sharrows were incredibly effective. So I don't know if we'd realize a lot of safety benefit from Sharrows.
I'm only thinking in terms of the symbol and the familiarity with the symbol and the fact that we can't have a bike lane. In the absence of any bike lane, a Sharrow is better than nothing whatsoever.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Hodges.
We'll look into that.
Okay. If there's no more questions, I'd like to maybe, I'm getting confused in my order. Barry, I think, could come up and make a, yeah, I know, feels so formal. Oh, my gosh. Derek, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Good evening, Madam Chair and Commissioners. My name is Barry Remis, and I'm representing COAST, the Coalition for Sustainable Transportation, and we've been delighted, along with the Bicycle Coalition, to have championed and partner to engage the city, and pleased to see that our advocacy is paid off and that the city has adopted Vision Zero as a policy, a strategy, and now an implementation mantra. So it's great to see this first official project going into play, and it gets us. It's any step in that direction is definitely worth it. We can definitely see the benefit. And we wholeheartedly support and hope that you'll support this and agree that it should be moved on to council for adoption. I should say for approval for doing this restriping. Anything that can reduce the potential for injuries, fatalities, et cetera, and make the corridor safer. We wholeheartedly applaud that. And Mr. Hodges, I'm with you there. I would certainly like, COAST, I think, would certainly like to see that if in the absence of a bike lane, because we understand the real estate is not there to be able to do that. And I guess, we're gonna say that we think that the public engagement process for considering the removal of parking to be able to put in a bike lane is probably worth it. And of course, with the feedback that you'd get from residents and the community on that, you make that decision. But if the residents feel and the community feels that the parking loss is too much of a pill to swallow, then Sharrows might be a good thing anyway. Not necessarily with the goal, or hopefully with the goal of improving safety, but at least raising awareness to motorists that this is a shared lane, and due to the lack of lack of bike lane and the corridor itself, which is highly traveled, as we know, the speeds on that stretch for motorists in that right travel lane to know that they're sharing that space with potential bicyclists, I think could be advantageous. And so also, I have my comments slipped down for the next item as well, but just to share that we also applaud the next item that we're going to be discussing, and also COAST. We want to thank you for reaching out to. We want to thank you for reaching out to COAST, involving to get our input in terms of Measure A funded projects for the next cycle as well. All right. Well, thank you very much.
I didn't have my microphone on. Thank you very much.
Kathleen?
David Hodges, please.
Thank you, Chair Rodriguez. Just one thought is, several months ago in the spring, we saw a video of Julie leading a group of cyclists, student cyclists from the elementary school from Adams, out and across 101 and making that trip. And it was illustrative of, and they had to use the street as a Sharrow at that time, and they had a peloton of cyclists, so they were able to do so, and they'd been trained to do so effectively. But in this process, and because of the cycling advocacy that Adams has represented, which has been a really positive thing, I'm thinking in this restriping, we really want to do everything we can to increase the cycling-friendly nature of this corridor. And I know it's difficult, but I'm just going to put in my 2 cents to make those kids at Adams who do know how to ride and are being trained as to how to ride safely and well, that we give them streets on which they can ride effectively and safely also. So thank you.
Chair Rodriguez.
Mr. Franz?
So if I could add in, I'm going to explain this comment, but I am thrilled that this is not a bike project.
Yes.
And let me explain here. So first off, I think that this project illustrates the seriousness with which the city staff and you all take Vision Zero and that approach. I think this is a very well thought out, very specific, like as you mentioned, Mr. Bailey, a bite-sized piece, but it's addressing citizen concerns and noted problems in a thoughtful way. A small part of a big corridor. And I think that the fact that the staff are empowered to make necessary changes using the right-of-way says a lot, because I think we're finally past some sort of ideological positions anytime we were talking about any roadway project in the past. And this project specifically is addressing concerns, and I love these images. This is pretty clear. Like, hey, this is the better way to address these concerns, and it's very well thought out. And I think it's actually a total privilege that we in the city of Santa Barbara have staff at the training and capacity and the bandwidth to do these type of projects. A lot of communities would, simply don't have the resources that we do. And we should appreciate this, and I'm so appreciative of the staff taking this on, and the community, being a little bit uncomfortable with some changes, but being willing to do the right thing if the methodology is going to bear out correctly. So I'd love to see this project happen, and like so many of the projects that we've undertaken, then a couple months, a year from now, everybody in the neighborhood being really pumped that we did it. And again, I'm so glad that this is not a bike project for that reason. Yeah. In terms of like the broader corridor, absolutely, we're also getting into the connection with Las Positas MODOC project. We are in one of the few areas in town where there's not a continuity of bike routes. And I would actually challenge this conversation to think outside of even a class 2 bike lane on this type of road. Even with some change in lane configuration, it's always going to be an arterial that's higher speed with a lot of volume. So I think that clearly there is also a need, especially around Adams School, which has done amazing. I mean, Adams School is really one of the treasures of our area in terms of what they're doing at that school site, and bicycling is a part of that. And the fact that regular field trips by bike are happening right on the edge of this corridor is really significant. And I think that the staff and this community have the ability to think big and think creatively. Clearly, we've done it before, and maybe we can do that again for this area. But I just want to come back to, I appreciate the bite-sized nature of this project, and I appreciate the extremely well thought out and well displayed nature in order to communicate to the community. So thank you. I trust and hope that this will go through very smoothly, and I think it represents a very positive step forward in terms of staff and this community's methodology for Vision Zero.
Thank you.
Are we ready to make a recommendation?
I will. I would move that we recommend to City Council that the project is consistent with the Vision Zero strategy.
Second.
Any discussion?
I had one quick question. This is, when the pavement is maintained here, it would be restriped when they do that. I don't know what that consists of, if they're just...
Chair Rodriguez, Committee Member Blackerby, this road was repaved a few years ago, so we will actually have to go and grind out stripe
Right.
and replace
Okay.
it with the center left turn lane stripe. So
It's worth it.
we are planning to do that next spring, summer.
Okay.
It's likely a $20,000 project or so. So
Beautiful.
compared to a lot of the safety projects we've done around town, quite cost effective.
It's a steal. Great. Thank you.
I just have one comment before we vote, and that is that the bicycle component in the city is becoming stronger, and I would not want to slow down this project, this specific recommendation tonight, by trying to add anything about bicycles, but this committee remains strongly supportive of bicycle improvements. So this is one step, and then maybe in the next iteration of the bike plan, we will be moving into a Shero, because it's something that people will have to learn to live with if we're going to have a really bikeable city. So I just want that on the record. Okay, I'll call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Nope. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, Cabrillo Bike Lane Safety Project?
So, Madam Chair, this next project you've already seen back in May 31, and we did run into some issues. This is the back end parking and safety improvements on Cabrillo, and it's with the bike lane too. We can categorize this as another Vision Zero project. It is on a corridor. We had some trouble fitting in all the elements, and now there's a particular fence that would have to be removed in order to make this happen. So Derek Bailey will tell you all about it.
Thank you. I'll be really brief with this. Like Rob said, we want to describe some of the engineering challenges we ran into, the solution to our engineering challenges, and just to make sure you're aware and the public's aware of what those changes are. So May 31st, almost 6 months ago to the night, we did present this to you. Since that time, the council adopted the Vision Zero strategy, so we are officially a Vision Zero city now. So this project does have a Vision Zero component to it. And as well, so I'll talk about that, and I'll talk really briefly about the refined concept design for the project. Just a refresher, we're talking about East Cabrillo Boulevard, next to East Beach. I think everybody knows where the volleyball courts are on East Beach, so this would be right adjacent to that area on Cabrillo. Vision Zero, just to reiterate, the purpose of adopting Vision Zero is to create a strong policy in the city that we are to eliminate all severe and fatal collisions by the year 2030. And again, the strategy to do that is to focus on priority corridors where the majority of those types of collisions are happening. Cabrillo Boulevard is a priority corridor. The collision patterns that are happening on Cabrillo Boulevard suggest unsafe speeds are the primary contributing factor. And as well, there are some concerns around a fatal collision that happened within the last few years of a motorcycle going eastbound on Cabrillo Boulevard, and they collided with somebody making a U-turn from the parking aisle. The majority of the collisions that are happening are just eastbound direction, entering the S-turn right near the bird refuge. Between the years 2015 and 2017, there were 8 collisions that happened, and 2 of them were DUIs, and 6 the police collision reports indicated that the unsafe speeds were the contributing factor. Since that time, and since we've investigated the collisions in a little bit more detail, we've really beefed up the signs going around that curve. So we've replaced all the old signs. The new signs are very reflective at nighttime. They're larger. They're really nicely spaced. So we're hoping that improves the collision record out there. But we feel there's more things that can be done yet. This is the Google Street View image of the corridor. I'm just going to point out to you while we have this image up, there is a fence, a little about 3-foot high chain link fence that separates the existing parallel parking aisle with the beach. So the concept design, safety improvements for all users, new bike lanes on Cabrillo, and that's consistent with the bicycle master plan, and additional beach access parking. And that parking is realized by implementing reverse angle parking. So this is something new to Santa Barbara, something we don't have in the city right now. But some of the benefits to reverse angle parking is better driver visibility. When drivers are pulling out of the parking space, they're already facing forward, and they have a really broad view of the street in front of them, so visibility is good. So we expect that will result in fewer collisions. The parking, although not safety related, will be better unloading and access for beach access. Your vehicle, the rear of it pointing towards the beach, your trunk will be, or your hatch will have really easy access. And the parking supply will increase by over 50% to nearly 100 spaces from 60 in that stretch. Just to illustrate the better visibility, this is an image I grabbed off the internet, but this is the perspective of a cyclist biking alongside of reverse angle parking, and you can see the person in this silver car looks like they're getting ready to pull out. It's really easy to make eye contact with them because of the position that they're in. So this just illustrates those added visibility benefits. Okay, so pardon my sketch, but this illustrates the challenge we were having with fitting all of this in, and there's about a 300-foot long section that the reverse angle parking just wouldn't fit in. What we were planning on doing, and this is illustrated in the top part, if this is the fence, we think we need at least 3 feet between the fence and the back of vehicles so that people can walk to the nearest opening in the fence. Otherwise, they're walking out in the street along the front of the vehicles. So we think we need at least a 3-foot opening. So in order to create that 3-foot opening, we would have to put parking blocks in there, and those parking blocks would have to be about 5 feet from the fence in order to provide that gap at the back of vehicles. That 5 feet pushed vehicles far enough out into the street that it didn't leave enough room for the 2 travel lanes and the bike lanes, and some extra maneuverability room in order for people to back into those spaces. So the solution is to replace that fence with a curb. So when vehicles back up, they can back right up to that curb. We gain 5 feet, and the project's feasible. That's the change. So we want the public to be aware of our plan to work with the Parks Department to remove that fence and replace it with a raised curb. So that is a change. And as well, we talked about this last time, but just to bring it up in the public again, in order to make this work, with 2 lanes on East Cabrillo, 1 lane in each direction, we are going to have to merge the eastbound direction from 2 lanes to 1 lane. And in order to do that safely at this particular location, feel pretty strongly that it'll work a lot better if the Cabrillo-Ninos intersection is an always stop controlled intersection rather than a traffic signal. And the reason is, with a traffic signal, if vehicles approach the intersection on a green light, they can pass through at full speed, and then we have to merge them together at full speed. If we're doing that from a stop-controlled intersection, they're entering that corridor at much lower speeds, and it's much easier to make that transition. Overall, the delay is comparable between an always stop and a traffic signal. The always stop actually performs slightly better during lower traffic volume times. The traffic signal performs slightly better during the busiest hours of the busiest day. So what I mean by that is, I'm going to show you a graph here, but these are the traffic volume distribution for a recent 2-month period. And you can see the majority of days had traffic volumes in the 7,500 to 8,000 range. We did have a few days where traffic volumes were over 10,000, likely on the weekends when it gets a little bit busier. But even during those days, there's only like a really busy hour during those days. So when we think about how do we design our roads and what kind of capacity should we build into our roads and how do we allocate space, what do we design for? over a 2-month period, are we going to design our roads to have enough lanes to serve those 8 hours? Or do we design our roads in a way where capacity is sufficient the vast majority of the time? Even during the busiest hours, it's still marginally inferior to the always stop condition, but it's very comparable. So just the purpose of this graph was just to illustrate the vast majority of the time we're dealing with lower volumes on East Cabrillo, and even during a little bit busier times, it's still going to be operate fine. Just to illustrate, like I said, most of the time the volumes are under 10,000 a day. How does that compare to other streets in the city? San Andreas, East Anapamu near the high school, Modoc Road, they're all in the 8,000 to 8,500 range. So that's comparable to East Cabrillo on normal days. A little bit higher volume streets, Upper De La Vina is a little over 11,000, Miggs Road a little over 12,000. So that's comparable to East Cabrillo on busier days. And our staff recommendation is that the TCC review and find the project consistent with Vision Zero principles. And the Vision Zero component to this project, it will be speed control. With the reverse angle parking with 2 lanes, we do expect lower operating speeds in the corridor, and as well just the better sight lines for the parked vehicle drivers pulling out will be a big benefit. Happy to answer any questions.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Ms. Blackerby.
The agenda says to recommend that we find it consistent with the bicycle master plan, and then this says with Vision Zero. Do we have to do both?
You can.
Okay. It makes sense to do both since it touches both. So
Yes.
I just want to make sure we know what we're
Believe
moving towards.
we did the bicycle master plan in May.
Right.
Yeah, I just don't know if we have to do it again because we're
Okay.
changing it somehow.
Can't hurt.
We might as well,
Yep.
right? Yeah. Okay,
We-
cool. Thank you. That was
we
my only
will
question.
Reiterate, yeah. I have a question about the little fence. I can't remember. Does it go all the way along? That little 3-foot fence, that little chain link fence? Starts down by the parking lot at the Cabrillo Pavilion, all the way up to the property, the estate, the Clark estate? I see.
Yes,
Okay,
just
good. Thank
here's
you.
the aerial photograph again.
Yeah,
There is
okay.
a bridge over Sycamore Creek at
Mm-hmm.
the western end of the volleyball courts. That's where the fence starts, and it does go all the way almost to the Clark estate. There is several gates in between where service vehicles can access the beach, but for the most part, it's a solid fence.
Okay, on that then, I do have a question. There's always the issue of people backing onto the grass, or, it's grass there and picnic tables. And I'm sure you've thought that through. I'd just like you to talk about it a little bit. That little chain link fence wouldn't stop a car plowing through, but with nothing but a curb, it's great to not have to carry all your picnic stuff around that little fence anymore. You can go straight through. But what about the issues of cars hitting the gas instead of the brakes or something?
Right. We are planning to put at least an 8-inch curb. Most curbs that you see at the side of the road, they're usually 6 inches. We are planning to do 8 inches. We might even make it a little bit taller. We don't want to have the backs of vehicles bottom out, but we do want to maximize the height of the curb to minimize that. We have agreed with the Parks Department that we'll evaluate this, and if that turns into a problem, we might have to readdress that fence, and perhaps it has to be just reinstalled a few feet back.
Instead of a fence, there's certain places I've seen where they end up with concrete posts, or stainless or steel posts that strategically placed so that a car couldn't plow through.
Right, yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to be a fence,
Yeah.
but something that's compatible with the beach setting.
Sure, thank you. Mr. Green?
This is a wonderful presentation. When this came before us earlier, I actually abstained from the recommendation because it was not as well professionally done as today. So this thing's really great. Like the this page, it's not identified in the attachment 1, I guess. The bus to Los Angeles comes through where?
The Airbus?
Airbus.
The Airbus, follow my mouse. The stop for that bus is right behind the Hyatt. So it's right near the, is it Arilla Del Mar? Is that the first street? I always get my East Beach streets mixed up. Yeah, it's directly behind the Hyatt, and from there it pulls out, and I believe it goes gets on the freeway at Milpas, and then it heads south to Carpentry as the next pickup.
This shows the existing signal, which might be noted as to be removed. I don't know. You're showing where the back-end parking is, but you're not showing that intersection is going to be a four-way.
Oh, yeah, I apologize. The intent was just to get people's bearings so they knew where the back-end parking was proposed.
Chair Rodriguez.
Mr. Franz?
So I'm actually part of a community group called Save the East Beach Fence. No, I'm just kidding. That fence is weird. It doesn't make any sense. It'll be good for it to be gone. Don't tell the other members of the group I said that. So this is really great for a couple of reasons. I'm full of kudos and accolades today. So first off, the project that's funded as part of the 101 HOV project for Santa Claus Lane is similar in that there's bikeway improvements and there's also beach parking improvements. And for all the acrimony between parking, on-street parking for vehicles and bike lanes, it's really great that the community is getting some project. In fact, a third project, which we'll find out soon, for Old Town Goleta Hollister, would do the same thing and actually potentially use reverse angle parking as well. So again, we're finally getting into the terrain of like win-win in terms of on-street parking in high interest areas and bike lanes where they're needed in high interest areas. So I think this is going to be a great project. I think it'll be valuable for the city of Goleta if we are able to get this parking in advance. Santa Barbara is starting to lead again, right? Yeah, that's really helpful. And yeah, great project. Again, I really want to point out how important it is to me how the planning for this project changed as a result of looking for injuries and fatalities for all modes. This is not a bike project. This is a Vision Zero project. And there's also community benefits in a really, I mean, that area, East Beach users, when it is a nice, warm day on a weekend, that parking is totally impacted. So that's really valuable. So thank you for all the work on this.
Thank you.
Mr. Hodges?
I just want to reiterate, in the back-end parking, providing visibility easily to your right, to your left, is a huge safety benefit. You don't have to be looking in a rearview mirror. I'm very impressed and I'm very appreciative of the work.
Thank you.
Mr. Remus, do you want to consider your prior comments as adequate? Okay, when are we ready, Derek? Is that all right?
Yes.
Okay.
As your
Go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
Thank you. Good to see you all again. Barry Remus
It's been
with
so
Coast.
long.
Except I can't believe I'm about to say what I'm going to say. I find myself, no, I know, there's no opposing this project, and of course, we full-heartedly, Coast has been thrilled to see this. Back and angle parking in Santa Barbara is just going to be fantastic. The safety benefits, we've been through it all before, and so we know those benefits are all there. And I wasn't actually sure what the change was, that this was going back before you again, and so now that I see it's about the cute little fence, I guess we need to ask ourselves, and I'm asking you to ask yourselves, why was it put in the first place? And the thing that I think about is, what happens on the beach there? There's, you got the volleyball guys and gals, and they're there, hardcore spiking away every day. But you've also got families. You've got people that are picnicking and having a great time at the benches. So it just makes me wonder, is the fence currently providing an element of safety that without it puts us at a slight risk? And I'm wondering about, for example, a little kid that runs out into the street, or a ball that runs out, that gets hit out into the street, or a dog that runs from the picnic area out into the street. So I almost wonder if maybe relocating the fence, pushing it back, or because the curb is going to stop cars from backing it too far. We know that. But I'm also just wondering if there's a possibility that we might be opening up a risk that we didn't necessarily think would be there. So Vision Zero all the way, and we certainly want to see this happen. So don't let this little concern of mine hold up the project, but I just wanted to throw that out for further possible thought. But by all means, Coast is again in support of the project. We like to see that hope you'll agree that this does conform to the Bike Master Plan. It conforms with the Vision Zero facets and mantra. And one other comment regarding Vision Zero, and as you folks move forward, I can't speak this to Rob, but I'm going to speak it to Jessica and Mr. Bailey behind me, that as you continue on with implementing Vision Zero projects or elements of Vision Zero within future projects, to really try to toot that Vision Zero horn as much as possible so that it increases the public's awareness of what the city is doing. We just wouldn't want the nature of Vision Zero to be behind the scenes. And I don't think that's the goal. I don't think that's what the city is intending. So that as you, the TCC and Planning Commission and City Council are made aware of the Vision Zero elements, we really would, of course, encourage that the city make those efforts, and that's the education component of it as well, to really message out the implementation of Vision Zero to the full extent that you can. All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Would anyone like to make a recommendation, and then maybe we can have a little more discussion?
A motion to adopt the presentation and to recommend to the city council is consistent with both the
Both the bicycle plan
master
and
plan
the Vision
and
Zero.
the Vision Zero.
You'd like to make that motion?
I think I just did.
Very good.
Second.
And Hillary's going to second. Any further discussion? I think the issue of the fence safety has been brought up, and you obviously understand the concerns. And yeah, it probably was holding back volleyballs all these years, but we'll find out. So, all right, may we vote on this recommendation? Mm-hmm. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? No? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Bailey,
Thank you.
as always. I want to point out just briefly that to the committee that we did receive the quarterly MTD report, but I think there's a little confusion as to whether we're going to actually discuss this report semi-annually or quarterly. I wasn't sure.
They're
So-
just quarterly now.
Okay. So, shall we just accept this and read it?
I think it was taken off the agenda.
Yeah, so it's a point of information. Okay, just wanted to clarify that. Okay, well, and let you all know that since you got it, there's a reason. I think we're ready to adjourn. Thank you all very much. It was a power-packed meeting, lots of stuff going on. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.